Hey guys, this is Dorian from Eternal Games with another video, and in this one I'm going to show you how to retopologize your characters and make the low poly model that you're going to need to import into Unity. And there's a few things that you need to understand before I get into the actual retopology. The first one, and probably the most important one, is the edge flow, is the concept of edge flow. And let me just grab the torso here and Control 1 to isolate it. So the edge flow is the idea that the way you're going to place all your geometry to make this low poly mesh the easiest and best mesh to use for animating. Basically, you're gonna have to place evenly distribute your polygons, your vertices and edges of your mesh to make the animator's life easier and show the best way of the animation. That's basically what you're gonna have to do. And to do that, I'm just gonna pick the first part. If your character is consistent of only one part, that's really not any different than this, except that it really depends on the animation that you're going for. For example, my character's leg here, because he's a robot, the leg is a separate part, the thigh is a separate part, the shin is a separate part, the foot and the toe are all separated. And if your character is consistent of one piece, you're gonna have to do the same thing for the knees and the ankles. Basically, you need, because the leg is going to bend backwards from the knee, you have to have the evenly distributed edge flow in the direction that your leg is going to bend, and the same goes for the elbows and the wrist. Everything that every part of the model that is going to bend with the rig and it's going to be animated, you need to be aware of that, and you need to be careful the way you need to be careful how you're placing your polygons. But we're gonna get into that a little bit more. Let's just start with the tools. So I'm gonna isolate the torso here because this is gonna be a separate part. Actually, this is gonna be combined with the neck. And let me just combine these two. Alright. So now I have the torso right here. And because it's a symmetrical mesh, I'm gonna go to Modeling Toolkit and turn on World X Symmetry to make it a little bit easier. And then I'm going to select the poly model and I'm going to turn it into a live mesh like so, and pick the quadra and start placing the polygons. This is the easiest way of doing this. You can I mean, theoretically you don't really need it. You could just place polygons in mid-air, but this is way faster, way better, trust me. So, and the next thing you need to be careful of is that if you're working with production and you need to have a certain pipeline, basically means that you have to have a poly count. You need to have a limit for the amount of the number of poly counts that you're allowed to use, because when it's a game, you need to be careful about how many polygons there are in a scene, because there's a limit that you can't go above. And for this particular character, my limit is 20,000 triangles. If you want to see or check out your poly count, you can go into display, heads up display, and turn on poly count. And this when it says trust, when you select the model that you're trying to check up on, this is going to be the number. This is going to have to be under 20k when we're done. but this is way higher because it's showing all the high poly models which have way too much poly count. Sorry, let's just turn this off for now. Okay, click on it and turn on quad draw. Okay, and if you're watching this, you're gonna notice that I'm trying to pick the best places to place my vertices, because this kind of has to, you kind of have to go with the look of the mesh to understand just how many polygons you actually need. And if I'm going just you know, however I want to, this is going to be way higher than it needs to be, and it's not going to look very good. And the reason I'm not giving this part so much poly count is because basically the rib cage of every character is almost one piece, and it bends very, very slightly in the animations, because a human's rib cage is one piece and it doesn't bend from like right here. Most of the bending is from the belly and the spine. That's why we're gonna give here much more poly count, much more edge flow here, edge loops here. So let's get this going a bit faster. This is basically a work of quality. You need to be you need to really practice on how to place your polygons. This is not a thing that you can master overnight, so don't be frustrated if you don't get it right in the first try. And always keep in mind that if you're over the limit when you're placing the when it comes to poly count, that's not the worst thing in the world. You can always go back and reduce your number of polygons. So when you're first starting out, don't be too caught up in the poly count number. So just try to follow the mesh, try to follow the form, and have the best looking character. That's the first thing you need to focus on, and that's your main worry. And you know, if you're being careful about this, you need to showcase all the big details, like the big gap between the pecs, or the traps, or the big details that the character has. But for example, you don't have to give any geometry to small details like these. You just put a big sheet over them, and they're going to be baked into the low poly mesh. For example, these little screws, these don't need any geometry at all. They're going to be baked into the mesh, and they're going to look amazing. They don't need any extra geometry. You don't have to go in here and place vertices around the small circles. So you need to find the fine line to not only make a good looking character, but also make a character that's going to be proper to use in a game engine. You can't just import anything, especially when it comes to independent game. You need to modify all your characters, all your props. These don't need any geometry. They're just details. You can just pass over them. I'm not placing a vertex here because it's gonna snap to this and it's gonna lift it right up. So I'm just gonna try, and I'm just blocking this out. I'm not gonna go crazy about the detailing and the placement just yet. Okay, it's kind of a tricky part. By the way, I'm just clicking and placing the vertices like so, and holding down shift. You can see the possibility of the faces, and whenever you're happy with it, you can just click on the spot and it's gonna make a face there. And if you want to get rid of it, just hold down Control and Shift, and if you go on a face, it's gonna delete the whole thing. If you go on an edge, it's gonna delete the whole thing. So it's a pretty cool tool to be using. Actually, no, it's just do this. By the way, this is pretty bad edge flow, but I'm not gonna worry about it just now. We can clean this up later. Right now we need to be quick and blocking this out. Like so. And keep in mind, it's really important to keep a clean geometry. You don't want big messes. You don't want like edges like this, like stretched out, edges like bent too much, edges that have too many triangles, or any end guns. You don't need that. That's not gonna help your character. You need to be clean, you need to be precise. And you need to follow the form, follow the mesh whenever it leads. And keep in mind that the mesh that's actually gonna go into the Unity is the low poly, and if you don't have a good low poly mesh, it doesn't matter if your high poly mesh is amazing. This is gonna be the one that shows the player, that's been shown to the player. Alright. This is actually not great, but like I said, this is not a very high poly character. 20,000 triangles, it's not that much. So from time to time we're gonna have to sacrifice the look and the cleanness for the optimization of the character to make it cheaper, so we can use it easily, we can animate it, we can rig and UV the character very easily. The less polygon you have, the easier it's gonna be to UV the character, or any other mesh for that matter. Okay, so this is the basic idea, and I'm gonna fast forward through the next part so you can still see it and understand what I'm doing, and I'll talk to you after that. And for the last part of this particular body part, there's the big holes in the back. And if you're wondering why I've left these like this, is because the shapes inside these holes are perfect cylinders. It kind of makes more sense to do them separately and just place them in the right place next to the geometry. And if you do this, it's gonna make the texturing part also easier, texturing and the UVing, because you might want to give more textile density to these parts than the actual body itself. Maybe you want it to have a little bit more quality in the textures, which would make sense in specific types. But that's not what I'm going for here. I just want to make this as clean as possible and make the texturing part a little bit easier. So I'm going to just pick one of these, and like you see, it's a sphere that has a specific shape on it. And I'm just going to open up, just going to bring this actual cylinder. It's not a sphere, I know why I keep saying that. Maybe 20 is a little too much geometry. Let's give it like 14, that's probably enough. And place it. I'm just gonna use the orthographic views to place this guy. Scale it and place it in the right place. And mind you, this is a much faster workflow. You don't have to make the object live actually. You don't have to pick every vertex he's placing and check it. Just gotta put this in the ballpark of where the cylinder is, and it's gonna work. And I'm not going to include the detailing in the inside of the cylinder. Obviously, like I said, you don't have to add all the details to the low poly geometry, because you can't use a character like that for video games or animating. It's just too much geometry. You can't UV that. You can't do anything with that. You can't rig a character like that. And you certainly can't use it in the game engine. I'm just blocking out the shape. Not any more than I need to. And bam. That's exactly what I need. If I turn this off, see, this is perfect. You can use this, you can UV, you can texture this, and it's easier, it looks better, it has a cleaner geometry. You don't have to go ahead and connect all these edge loops to the edge loops on the torso piece here. This makes much more sense. And so I'm just gonna finish the character here and kind of show you my progress and tell you everything that I've done after that. So let's zap to that point. And this is the final result, guys, and I'm quite pleased with the way it looks. Let me turn on wireframe so you can see everything. I've used everything to try to copy the shape of the high poly mesh and keep a clean edge flow and use quads as much as possible, and only put triangles whenever I had to keep the poly count as low as possible. I don't have any faces that I don't need. For example, these are empty behind where you can't see them. And This character is now ready to be rigged and textured, and in the next video I'm gonna UV and pack the UVs. I'm gonna talk about the different things, the different levels of the UVing, so stick around.